Good morning. Thank you for joining us for Research 411, a talk show focused on sharing best practices and trending research topics delivered by professional staff and prominent UT Dallas researchers from various disciplines. I'm Tiffany Willoughby, Education Programs and Outreach Manager in the Office of Research. I will be your moderator today. Joining me are your presenters, Amanda Boone, Institutional Review Board Director in the Office of Research, Integrity and Outreach, and Lisa Adams, Director in the Military and Veterans Center. Together, they will discuss special considerations when conducting human subjects research projects that include veterans. Welcome, Amanda and Lisa.
Hi, Tiffany. Thank you so much. As you said, my name is Amanda Boone, and I am the Director for the Institutional Review Board Office at UT Dallas. We are housed in the Office of Research, and basically what we do is look at all research projects that involve human subjects that are affiliated with the institution, with UT Dallas. And that would be any research project that's been conducted by a UT Dallas staff, student, faculty member, or for an outside project, anybody wanting to come in and access our students or faculty or somebody here at our institution. And we're just looking at those projects to make sure that all the risks to human subjects have been mitigated and reduced as much as possible. So I'll turn it over to Lisa.
Hi. Thank you for having me here today. I'm Lisa Adams. I'm the Director for the Military and Veterans Center. We are a department within the Division of Student Affairs, and our office is located in the Student Services Edition. My background began at the University of Michigan, where I was an engineering student. I was also a cadet in Air Force ROTC. So when I graduated, I received a commission, and then I went and served in the Air Force. I was a pilot for about 9 years. I flew 2 different aircraft. I flew the C-21, which is a Lear 35. It's used for VIP transport, that's generals and admirals. But we also had an air evac mission. You could fit a litter, you could take out the seats and fit a litter into one side of the Lear, and then we could have medical professionals on board. After I did that assignment for a few years, then I went to the B-52, which is a long-range strategic nuclear conventional bomber, and I finished out my flying career in that assignment. After like about 9 years, a little over 9 years, I went into the reserves and I worked as an admissions officer. So that's really where I got the higher education bug. And it was during my time in the reserves that I learned about the post 9/11 GI Bill. And this is a pretty amazing legislative act. It was enacted in 2008, but it started in 2009. And what we saw when this bill passed, it was the most comprehensive educational benefit that the federal government had given to veterans, which included tuition at state institutions and a capped tuition at private institutions, plus a housing allowance and a book stipend. We saw an influx of veterans into our higher ed institutions. And that is when we started also seeing the veteran centers starting to develop. And that's what happened here at UTD. So in 2012, we had students who had indicated they wanted a center. The Student Affairs Division was able to accommodate that request. And they opened the Veteran Services Center, which was in the lower level of the Eugene McDermott Library. In 2017, when UT Dallas opened up the Student Services Edition, that's when we moved into our current location and we changed our name to the Military and Veterans Center. So what we do on campus is we do support a very specific student population. We have 4 goals, essentially. The first goal is really to foster community among our student veteran population and military affiliated students. So that does include students who previously served in the military, those who are currently serving, especially those in the Guard and Reserve, and family members, and then our ROTC cadets who are on campus. So we are a center that's usually open Monday through Friday from 8 to 5. We're taking a break from that like everybody else. And we have a staff that is specifically equipped to work with military affiliated students. So we're very resourceful. Our second goal is to honor their contributions, both in the military and academically. So we do have a National Honor Society. We present cords, red, white, and blue cords when they graduate, so they can wear those at commencement. And then we also do a Veterans Day event for our faculty, staff, and students. Outside of that, we connect our students to resources, both on campus, off campus. We have a lot of great partnerships here on campus, and so we are working with them to do different networking events with companies, getting them prepared to go from a military employment to civilian. And then finally, our last thing is we do some informing and educating of our own campus. So we have a Green Zone program, which is for faculty and staff. It's a military cultural competency. And then during Veterans Day and Memorial Day, if you've noticed the flags lining the mall, those are part of our efforts to educate our campus about those particular holidays.
Thank you very much, Lisa, for sharing that information with everyone. Amanda, can you go ahead and address how Lisa's world intersects with human subjects research?
Absolutely. There are, and I was going to ask Lisa to kind of give us a little statistics of the population here at UT Dallas, but when researchers, we do have researchers on campus that do specifically target the veterans and the military personnel. And so when you are looking at populations that have different experiences, different backgrounds, different realities, there are special considerations that you have to, keep in mind. And so it's just really important to understand the population, understand who it is that you're looking at. So if you wanted to do a study that is really focused on mental health, and you're just looking at the general population, that's a sensitive study because you're talking about mental health. But if you're drilling it down further and you want to really focus on mental health of veterans, then that's a different study, and it is targeting those veterans for their experiences and part of who they are as their identity. And so that makes it a little bit more sensitive in nature, and the risk of that goes up. It's a little higher risk for those populations. It's important to know how to talk to different populations. What the language really does matter. What is it that you want to say, and that doesn't offend, frighten them off, make them not trust you, that type of thing. So it's really just important to know the population, what is appropriate, and how to interact with those individuals to be as respectful as possible.
Excellent. Thank you, Amanda. And Lisa, do you have any comments related to Amanda's conversation that she just shared regarding veterans?
Yes, I have a lot of comments, and Amanda made some very good points, especially about language. Let me give just some context about this population. First of all, here at UT Dallas, last fall, so about a year ago, we had around 600 students that we knew were veterans. They had self-identified either on the application or because they were on a veteran benefit. And typically our ratio is 70% are undergraduate, 30% are graduate students. So the breakdown for gender is really reflective of the military, with 84% men, 16% women, at least at UT Dallas. But the majority of our undergraduate veterans, they're studying in engineering, computer science, about 30% of them there, and 20% are in the School of Management. And then when you look at graduate school, the majority, over 60%, are in the School of Management. So that's what it looks like here at UT Dallas. We have over 100, well, last count was over 130 faculty and staff that are also military veterans. So we do have a vibrant community here on campus. When we work with this population, it's important to understand who's under investigation. And so there is a term called military cultural competency. And you really hear about this in the healthcare field, mental health, social work, and how do you get providers who are maybe not familiar with the military, don't have any background with that, able to work with a very unique population. And so you will see in the literature quite a few articles that address military cultural competency for those who are providing care for veterans. And then again, I think it's important for research to understand this population that's under investigation. And so if you think of the military as its own cultural group, because it has its own language, it has its own behaviors and norms, it has its own belief system, it I think makes it more clear as to why we put special emphasis on this group. As far as the language, military, and this is really good like when you're engaging or interacting, if you have a participant or if you're providing care. But military are very direct, succinct, very efficient. We're so efficient we use acronyms for like everything. And so if you haven't been out of the military a while, or you haven't engaged with a lot of civilians, as we call non-military folks, you have to translate. And so you'll hear acronyms are used in the language. As far as the norms, the behavior in the military, we wear uniforms, we have a chain of command, we have rank. There is a definite process for how you approach different issues. There's saluting, so we render these customs and courtesies. The belief system has to do with the service to our country, right? We're doing something that's very unique. And mission oriented, there is an element of self-sacrifice potentially involved, and really the teamwork, the group over the individual. And so as you begin to see this group as a cultural group, you can maybe start to understand kind of where they're coming from as you engage and interact. Now, one thing I have noticed is really that salience with your military identity or your veteran identity. It may have a little bit to do with how long you served in the military, how long you've been out of the military, and certainly the intensity of your experiences. So those who've experienced combat may have a different identity centrality than those who didn't. It's a very diverse group. The military is very diverse, and we always like to say one size does not fit all. So it is important to get down to that individual level. The military, when you think about that job, there is really no job or mission similar to the military outside of the military. It's very unique. There are some transferability of skills, like you can learn something in the military and take it out, but really there's no institutional organization that can compare to or replicate what's done in the military. And that is because the military is a radical departure from, what you've grown up with, from your prior experiences and worldviews. And again, that comes back down to that culture where you have to really learn to subordinate your own self-interests because you're working a mission for the group. You have to learn about following orders, obeying legitimate authority and what that entails. And then again, that idea of self-sacrifice in service to your country and what that means. So we take those characteristics of our military service members and we see those as strengths, but so often people see them as deficits. And we'll talk about too some of those stereotypes that can impair your ability to conduct research depending on the language that you use. I think another important thing to understand is that the military is smaller than it used to be. So the military is decreasing in size, but so is the population of veterans. And so if you're looking to study this group, you need to understand too that there's not as many veterans out there as there used to be. In 1968, we had 3.5 million members serving on active duty, and today we have 1.3 million. And so even the availability of veterans, and if you're studying a more like subgroup like women, currently in our population, just the total population, 1 out of 7 men have served in the military, but 1 out of 69 women. And so as you're seeking participants, as you're going through that process, you have to understand too how to cast a wide net in order to get as many folks to participate in your survey. I think another thing too is just your demographic. If you look at those who are under the age of 35, that percentage is even lower. So just knowing about the population, that it is decreasing, that the cohort of women, the percentage of women is increasing. So there are fewer people in the military, fewer veterans, which means maybe you have less of a familiarity yourself because you're not engaging with someone who's served in the military.
Excellent. Lisa, I do have a question for you, and then following on after that, a question for you and Amanda. The first question is, do you feel that the university culture is similar to the military, and if so, how?
Actually, no. The higher education is a huge departure from the military culture. And in the military, you have a very strict chain of command. There is a real absolute authority compared to higher ed, which is very loose and collegial. There's relative authority. It's not as clear who is in charge. So at least from a student's perspective, when you go into a classroom, you would think that your faculty member, your professor is in charge of that classroom, but that's not necessarily the way it works in higher education as it does in the military. And so I think there are a lot of differences. This is one of the things that we do talk about in our green zone training. And the one thing that both have in common is tradition and history. And so it really depends on, I guess, your institution that you attend, whether or not you do a lot of those traditional events and programs like we do in the military. The military is very much merit-based, a lot of rewards. You know, you get ribbons, you get recognition, and so if you can see, there's some of that in higher ed, but generally I would say they're completely different. And the other thing too, the military is so much about teamwork and working together and mission focus. And you know, higher ed is really discovering your own path. What are you doing individually? What are your goals? And so there are differences for sure with the cultures.
Excellent. Thank you for your answers. We have another question, and it can be answered by both Amanda and Lisa, please. Would it be beneficial for a researcher to study up on military culture prior to submitting a protocol and or conducting research with veterans?
I would say absolutely, it would be beneficial. When you are conducting research, a lot of times you are asking people really personal questions about themselves, and so they need to feel like they can trust you. You even to connect with them enough to, when you're doing the recruitment process, how do you what is the language that you're using in your recruitment flyers? How are you recruiting? Where are you going to do that recruitment? So it can inhibit your ability to get participants in the door in the first place. And it can, if you don't know who the population and what makes them unique, what their experience might be as a population in general. I mean, everybody's going to be different, but in general, as a population, just like Lisa was saying, what is their personalities most typically like? What are they used to when they're in the military? That type of thing. But you just want to be as respectful as possible. And it's really, really easy to say something or use a term that doesn't connect with another person and might kind of draw them out and not really want to engage with you as much. So I think it's absolutely important to know who it is that you want to access and talk with and gain that information, because it really is about trust.
Absolutely. And Amanda, can you also shed a little bit of light on any special considerations individuals or researchers wanting to conduct research on veterans might want to have in their protocol? Because of course you have a veteran and they've served in the military, but they may also want to participate in research and have other vulnerabilities, perhaps hearing loss or some other ambulatory issues. So could you maybe speak to that and how those types of situations might affect the way an individual conducts research on this population? Absolutely.
And typically, and this is another reason why it's important to kind of study up, do your research, is a lot of the times the research that I've come in contact with at UT Dallas, they're looking at specifically, there's something about that veteran's experience as a veteran that caused or really kind of contributed to what it is that they're studying. So if you are looking at, and for instance, we have researchers who are really interested in how the brain stores and retrieves memories, information. And so they are doing, brain stimulations, all kinds of different techniques to see how the brain is affected. And what they're studying is, it might be dementia. It might be post-traumatic stress disorder. Well, they're specifically looking at veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder. They're looking at veterans who have some sort of brain injury, some sort of, something like that. So it is the nature of what it is that they're studying is really reflective on the experiences that that person has had as a veteran, which makes it really sensitive topic. So what the IRB is going to want to look at is they're going to want to know that A, the researcher understands that that's sensitive, and B, that they have a plan in place to mitigate any risks that might come up. So there are always going to be the psychological risks involved with certain studies. If you're looking at people with maybe they have vision loss or they have hearing deficits, how is it that you're going to communicate with that individual? How are you going to be sure that they really understand what it is that you're doing? Whether that be the language in the consent form and how that's written, is it really clear? Because that individual is the best person to decide whether or not they want to be in the study. And so, is the information clear? Is the compensation, is that, I mean, just everything within it, is it appropriate for that population? And is there any risk involved? And if so, how is that going to be mitigated is what the IRB is going to want to know.
Great, thank you very much. Lisa, would the Military Veterans Center at UTD be a valuable resource for researchers wanting to conduct this type of research? And if so, what kind of services could they offer?
Well, I think the Military and Veterans Center certainly can assist with recruitment of participants, but it really depends on what your study is about, whether or not there are students on this campus who meet your criteria and whether or not they want to participate. So we do assist in posting flyers and helping with those recruitment materials. So throw that into your IRB that you want to use a campus department to help you with that recruitment. And certainly we can do so, especially even on our own social media channels. But there's so many different types of research right now, right? We do have a huge emphasis on the medical research, psychological and mental health research, but there's even research in the arts and humanities, right? So there are veterans who are portrayed in the literature and film and music and art, and also now veterans are contributing to those things. So there's a wide range of areas for you to do research. Public policy with the Department of Veteran Affairs, it's this huge organization. It has a Veteran Benefits Administration, a Health Administration, plus then you even have like the Texas Veterans Commission. So there's research involving public policy, and really if you want to poll people and find out what they think about how things are going, we certainly have a pool of candidates. But as Amanda was saying, it's really in how you're seeking participants and the language that you use, because we're very specific. Veterans are very detailed. And if you say something that is out, like you may not realize you're excluding someone because of the language that you're using. And one of the examples I'll use, just saying you're recruiting veterans could pose difficulty in recruiting people who've served in the military. And that is because the word veteran itself has different meanings to different folks. And it's really about our own culture and our own society. A lot of folks associate the word veteran with a combat veteran or someone who's older or male, and they may not even self-identify themselves. This is definitely true with women, but there are attitudes and words that are used that someone may be a veteran, but they may not think of themselves as a veteran. So when you use language to recruit, I would suggest just asking if someone has served in the military, that they could participate in the study. And then how you frame combat. If you're looking for someone you're looking for a combat veteran, again, what do you exactly mean by combat? Are you talking about somebody who's been exposed to combat, deployed to a combat area, or actually participated in firing through an exchange? So there are so many tools out there available to help you understand the language. I'm going to point out there's one that the VA offers just right off their website, but it's called the Deployment Risk and Resiliency Inventory. And within that assessment are multiple scales. So there is one that's about combat experiences, and there are 17 different questions that they ask to find out what is your exposure to combat. Some of it is just being fired upon, not firing. And so I would suggest to be really particular of what you're looking for. If you're looking for somebody who deployed, Are you only looking for certain areas, Iraq or Afghanistan, or are you looking more extensively to our experiences? And so being careful to use that language. The other thing that Amanda was mentioning had to do with post-traumatic stress, and I'll mention that so in order for a service member to be treated by the VA, which is the Department of Veteran Affairs, the hospital, they have to go through a process of claiming an injury or an issue that happened while in the military. And then the VA can assess whether or not that was service connected. And so you have folks that are they take their medical records, they get it assessed, and they see whether or not it's service connected, and then they can receive treatment from the VA. But there is definitely a subset of the population who does not trust or does not want to work with the VA. And so understanding if you are looking for specific things, does it have to be something that has already been reported to the VA? Can it be something that is not necessarily you're receiving a compensation for that? And I think that's just important to understand too, that those disabilities may or may not have been reported in the military. There are reasons why people would not go seek medical assistance for things that happen to them while they're in the service, and so it's not in their medical records. So really understanding, not everyone goes to the VA, not everyone has that service connection. They may have something that happened while in the military, but it may not be documented. And so as you're doing your recruiting, being open to the idea that there are just a lot of different attitudes toward receiving treatment. And a lot of that does have to do with part of that culture we talked about earlier in the military. The military is very self-sufficient. People know how to get the job done. So seeking assistance is not always top on the list. It's really getting it done. So the other thing I wanted to mention, just when you're seeking participants, and again, language matters, but there are so many different avenues for finding veterans. Certainly, if you're looking for those veterans maybe under the age of 35, you may want to look on college campuses, and you may have to do multiple IRBs to recruit veterans from those campuses. But in our area, in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, we have a lot of community organizations. We have veteran service organizations like the American Legion and the VFW. We have, of course, the county offices, Texas Veterans Commission. We have a lot of ways in which to get your message out. And so consider that too when you're going through that, how you're thinking about recruiting. And because ages, you're going to see different age ranges depending on where you're asking for those participants. Veterans are very good about word of mouth, so consider snowball sampling, depending again what your study is, because they may, if you're looking for a particular injury or you're looking for a particular type of deployment combat, they might tell someone they know about the study that you're doing. And so you might be able to find participants that qualify for your study through just the word of mouth. So keep those strategies in mind when you're recruiting participants.
Fabulous. Thank you, Lisa. One thing that we may have briefly glazed over that I wanted to bring up again was the type of distress a conversation may cause. Can you speak to, having served in the military and how someone might even take that term, served, and be offended by it and be offended by that question?
So yeah, there are definitely conversations that are meant for people who know you well. And when I'm asked questions about my military service that I think or I view are invasive, I kind of wonder what is the motivation behind the person who's asking those, who wants access to my experience. And so I will tell you there is a real importance to relationship building. And again, it really depends on the type of study that you are doing. You certainly need to have a screening questionnaire, right? That's asking the questions to make sure someone's eligible. But in terms of just having conversations, there are several stereotypes or assumptions about people in the military. And one is that you've killed someone, and the other is that after deployment you have post-traumatic stress. And so these are the stereotypes or assumptions that a lot of veterans have already faced. when someone asks you if you've killed someone, that is completely invasive and really voyeuristic to want to understand, that without getting to know them. The other thing too is when you ask someone, have you been to Iraq? Have you been to Afghanistan? Or do you serve in combat? Those questions are almost a valuation of your service. Again, if you don't know that person, and if they're asking if you've served in these areas, why are they asking? Do they value that service more than someone who hasn't deployed? I mean, there's certainly so many different ways you can serve in the military, that starting with those questions, leading with those questions, I would avoid. And again, I'm not talking about screening question. I'm talking about simply these conversations. And so I think definitely you want to be aware of the language that you're using and maybe what you're saying behind that and why you're saying it or why you're asking it. And those are just like little microaggressions that you can experience without people even understanding that that's what it is. It's really an inappropriate question.
Excellent, thank you. And finally, can you speak to Warrior Smart? Can you tell me a little bit about that program? And if not, Amanda, can you speak to it?
Well, the Warrior Smart program is through the Center for Brain Health's Brain Performance Institute, and they've done so much great research that they created this program for our military connected students, and there's even an equivalent program for spouses and caretakers. And it's really about how to use your brain more efficiently based on their science. What we are able to do is we partner with them typically once a semester, and we offer Warrior Smart on campus to our veterans as well as our staff and faculty who've served in the military, so that it's just that easier access for them. But I can't go really into the science of it all. I just know that it's a really, I've gone through it myself. And again, they do present these strategies for you to think more efficiently. And most of our students that go through it are really grateful. And one of the reasons they want our student veterans to go through it is because they've been potentially out of the classroom for a long time, right? You could have served in the military, you could have gone in right after high school, and then you served for 4 or 5 years, and now you're back in the classroom. So it really is a great way to get your brain thinking again academically.
Great. Well, as we start to close out our show, I was wondering if, Amanda, you could offer maybe top 3 tips for individuals interested in conducting research with veterans. And then on the flip side, I will ask the same of you, Lisa, if you could leave our audience with top 3 takeaways to put in their tool belt.
I think the top thing I would say is get to know the population, get to know a little bit more about that population, because when you submit that application, the IRB, any population that they're looking at that they want to, if you're targeting a population, the IRB wants to know that you have some familiarity with that population, so you can foresee the risks involved, because the risks are specific. There's risks to everyday people, but then it's really based on experiences and realities and things like that. So that would be my first one, is do that background research into the population that you're looking at. And then I think it's just, I think that to me is the biggest one, is that if you can kind of identify those risks, you have a way to mitigate those risks. And that's the number one thing that the IRB is going to want to look at when they are looking at that IRB application.
Thank you, Amanda. And Lisa, tips and tricks to share with the attendees?
Sure, definitely I agree with Amanda in that your language matters. So again, how you're recruiting participants, how you're casting that net, asking them if they've served in the military rather than if they are veterans. Those are really important considerations. If you do not have a veteran on your team, which is likely you don't, really, you may want to find a veteran to review your materials, your recruitment materials, and say, oh yeah, that doesn't sound right because this makes me think this. And that's just, again, a tip that you may want to do, is to get a once over from a veteran or somebody who maybe meets your criteria. The second thing is to remember too that military is very mission focused. Veterans are very mission focused. We see this with our students. There's a lot of they have a lot of competing priorities, right? And they have a goal to get their degree. They want to move on and get going. And so I think it's really important to communicate what the purpose is of your study and whether or not it will not just help them, but will help other veterans. Because again, this team orientation, we want to help each other out. We want to make things better for everyone. They are not receiving a service from you is not keeping someone else from receiving that service. You know, this is something that's going to have a benefit to the larger population. And I think that's important to communicate to that mission. And then my third tip would be that if you are a UT Dallas staff or faculty member, that you come through the Military Veterans Center's Green Zone training. So this is our cultural competency training that we do at UT Dallas. It typically is offered once a semester. We're actually in the process of reformatting it so that we can offer it virtually. But we talk about just very basic military terminology. We talk about transition issues out of the military into college. We talk about great resources. You hear from a panel of our amazing student veterans. We go through some scenarios. And I think that's that's a great way to start the conversation because it may bring up other questions that you have as you're about to work through your research.
Excellent. Well, Amanda and Lisa, thank you for being on our program today to share valuable information with our community. Registration and so much more can be found at research.utdallas.edu. Thank you.